Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, True Crime Files. Before I start, let's do the housekeeping. If you can like and share my video, comment, you can put where you're from, what you think on this case, and I will reply to every single comment that I get. This man here, he looks evil. He looks a bit of a scum and rough around the edges and a thug. He actually um, is a domestic abuser who broke his partner's neck, leaving her paralyzed as jail. He's a landscape gardener and he was jailed for 16 years plus a 4-year extended license period. Um, he had conservative control over his partner, and he would lash out to her verbally and abusively and physically. I don't condone this sort of thing. I had a abusive relationship many years ago, and I was being controlled what I could say and what I couldn't do. And it was that severe that when I was pregnant, my partner, who was abusive and controlling at the time, wouldn't let any men do any of my examinations when I was pregnant. So it made life awkward because I had to have it put on my file, only females to be dealing with me. And one day, a female nurse had asked me, you know, why was I uncomfortable in men doing the examinations? And I just simply explained and said, my partner's asked me not to have any men doctors dealing with me. And I should have said no at the time, but when you're in an abusive and controlling relationship, it's hard than what it sounds to be to get out of it. You know, people say, "Oh, just leave them, walk out." It's easier said than done. And I went through hell and back, and then one day, a lady nurse came up to me and she said, "It's only me and Doctor XYZ or whatever his name was at the time." And she said, "But I need someone to help me with the examination." And I said, "That's fine." I said, "I don't mind." And luckily, that was the day my partner wasn't with me. And then, the male doctor walked in the room with the female nurse and said, "I see on your file, it says only female nurses and doctors to deal with you," sort of thing. And I said, "Well," I said, "it's not my doing." I said, "It's my partner's doing." I said, "He just doesn't like the idea of another man touching me, even though it's all done in medical profession. It wasn't done in any sort of like sexual ways at all." And I said to him, I said, "It's fine." I said, "You do what you need to do." And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm sure." I said, "But I know when I go home, I'm not telling my partner that a male doctor examined me." And it was like if I had a GP appointment, I had to see female GPs and that was incredibly hard because most of the doctors at the surgery were all men. But I got out of that relationship in the end, and it wasn't a happy way of getting out. He was still a bit nasty, spreading lies about me, and made me to look the bad person and him the better person. But this doctor, he was coercive as not doctor. This bloke is a landscaper, and he was over his partner as well. So I just read a little bit out and then I'll play the court thing. An abuser who suggested it was play fight that broke his partner's neck, leaving her paralyzed and in need of round-the-clock care, has been jailed for grievously bodily harm. So that's GBH. Landscape gardener Robert Eason, 57, was jailed for 16 years, plus a 4-year extended license period. He had exercised his control over his partner, being loving 1 minute and lashing out verbally and physically the next. I know exactly how that feels. This is like hitting home to me and bringing back memories that I didn't want to have brought back again. On 17th of February 2025, Ethan partner tried to end the relationship. I was in the same place. In response, Ethan carried out a violent assault, culminating him pushing down on his partner's head with such force that her neck broke. Now, to do that, it has to be quite strong force that he used. Poor woman didn't stand a chance. Alison Walsenhome. Why do these people have names that are difficult to pronounce, especially when you got dyslexia? Of the Crown Prosecution Service said, in a fit of rage, Robert pushed his partner's head down with such force it broke her neck, changing her life forever. After years of compulsive control, he assaulted her, belittled her, tormented her, deliberately frightening her. I can, vouch for that. I had the same thing. So I can understand how frightened she was. But she tried to be strong to come out of the relationship, and it ended badly for her. One that is life-changing injuries, to her. Then he carried out a brutal assault on her when she tried to end the relationship. He attempted to evade responsibility for his actions, telling various lies about how his partner became injured later. Later, he accepted causing the injuries, which left the woman paralyzed from the chest down, but claimed that he did not intend to cause serious harm. The evidence did not allow us to consider and accepting that. Well, I'm glad. And abusers will always lie. And the abusers always make it out it's the other person's fault when it's not. The CPS was determined to see Ethan face the full consequences of his actions as we pushed to go towards trial. The jury saw through his lies and found him guilty of intentionally inflicting grievous bodily harm. Well, I'm glad there was a good jury that day and supporting that woman. The incredible strength shown by the victim during the prosecution cannot be overstated. Her support has allowed us to bring the strongest possible case against a dangerous abuser and ensure he faces the full force of the law. Ethan and the woman began the relationship some 8 years before the life-changing assault. It started well, but over time, Ethan became verbally and abusive, criticizing and belittling her. He could be very loving and made her believe that she had been overreacting to the incidents when she was frightened and the relationship continued. This was to be the pattern of Ethan's control, loving 1 minute, abusive the next, and violent on the next. The violence escalated back in 2021. Ethan wrapped her head in the bedsheet, causing her to struggle to breathe. Sorry, this is, a bit strong, and that I should have read this before I published it. But hey ho, we're here now. Just got to pull out my big girl pants and carry on reading it. In January 2025, following a disagreement, he accelerated rapidly to frighten her and then performed an emergency stop just before the wall. He then headbutted her and scraped her face with his stubble. Poor woman. I can see why she was terrified. The final incident occurred. Sorry, I've got my cat coming up. Hunter. Where was it? The final incident occurred on the 17th of February 25, when the woman tried to end the relationship calmly, telling Ethan it was for the best as they were arguing. Ethan flew into a rage, started shouting and accusing her of causing an argument, and pushed her forcefully against the headboard and grabbed her by the throat. He then left the room and briefly returned, shouting, "Shut the fuck up," pushing her head with such force that it broke her neck. By the time he stopped, the damage had been done. After some time convincing, he called an ambulance, lying to the operator, saying she'd fallen out of bed. She was taken to the Royal Preston Hospital, where she was diagnosed with a broken neck. She had an operation to restore her spinal alignment, but the neurological damage rendered her to be a paraplegic and couldn't be repaired. Eason was arrested and gave a prepared statement during his police interview, where he claimed they'd been play fighting. On the first day of his trial at Preston Crown Court, Eason pleaded guilty to 2 counts of actual body harm and 1 count of controlling behaviour. He admitted breaking his partner's neck, but denied that he had intended to do serious harm. Such a bastard. Sorry, but he is. I've got no time for these guys. Don't know why I'm giving him airtime either. Following the trial, he was found guilty of causing grievous body harm with intent. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison, plus another 4 years extended license at the same court on the 27th of February 2026. Right, I shall play the news bit now for you, and then I shall have a drink because that was a lot. Right, let me try and add this to the stage. Just need to remove that horrible man and play that one. Right, so let's go on to this one. The judges got to be strong as well.
Be drawn up in the appropriate amount, and I make a restraining order as sought, which will remain in force until further order. It's unusual to make an order without limit of time, but I am satisfied that in the unusual circumstances of this case, it is both necessary and proportionate to ensure the safety and well-being of those protected by the order. You, Robert Eason, were convicted by the jury of the offence of causing grievous bodily harm with intent to Trudy Burgess, count 3 on the indictment at B4. You're also to be sentenced on counts 1 and 2 for assaults occasioning actual bodily harm on the same victim. You pleaded guilty to those counts on the day of trial. However, they'd only been added on the 20th of October at a relatively late stage. And in those circumstances, I will afford somewhat more than the conventional 10% credit which would apply for pleas entered at trial. You'll receive 15% credit for those pleas. However, count 5, controlling or coercive behaviour, had been added in the June of 2025. You will receive only 10% credit for that plea entered on the day of trial. There can, of course, be no credit for the offence of causing grievous bodily harm with intent, of which you were convicted by the jury. All of these offences arise out of a relationship between you and Trudy Burgess. Sadly, her husband had died in the November of 2016, and you and she became known to each other subsequently through your working for her sister and her brother-in-law. A relationship followed, which was, for the first 18 months, a happy one. However, thereafter, a cycle developed whereby you would become verbally or physically abusive, then make up to her, and the relationship would carry on. When angry, which you frequently were, you would be verbally abusive. You had real difficulties in her being a teacher, and you derided her work on the basis that it was somehow not as valuable as yours. You would call her a
Oops. Oh.
husband, remarking with remarks such as, "I bet you gave him a brain tumour, bitch. You won't give me one."
This is so hard to listen. It just brings it all back home to me. And I didn't think it would affect me, but it has affected me. So after I played this, I will take a break because it just brings back horrific memories.
If she accidentally dropped something, you would swear at her and mock her. By your admission to controlling and coercive behaviour, you accepted that you were also engaged in assaults. You would grab her, push her, you would deliberately scare her and then mock her for being frightened of you. You told her that you enjoyed her being frightened. One minute you would mock and belittle her, and the next you would treat her kindly. When she tried to leave you, you would claim she was overreacting to the extent that she would be persuaded that somehow she was in the wrong. You succeeded in separating her from her family, such that she felt isolated and under your control. I won't set out in more detail the coercive and controlling behaviour matters, save to say that it involved violence, bullying, and humiliation over a period of time. You, in addition, by managing to separate from her family, left her more vulnerable still. It's perhaps the hallmark of a sophisticated abuser to intersperse violence and cruelty with false kindness and care. Your behaviour was extreme and confusing, that, as you intended, you led this intelligent and articulate woman to doubt her own experiences. We see those thought processes in the Apple notes which she wrote to herself. It is a chilling insight into your manipulation and control of her. The two assaults to which you pleaded guilty were particularly serious. Count one concerns an incident in an Airbnb when, after an argument, you launched an unprovoked and deliberate attack upon Miss Burgess when she was on the bed. You wrapped her head in a bedsheet so that she was unable to breathe. The next day, she was still suffering from a sore throat. Count two occurred in the January of 2025. You'd been out for dinner with friends. On the way home, Miss Burgess complained that they couldn't host friends at your house as you had insufficient cutlery and crockery. It was a feature of your controlling behaviour that whilst you made it clear that you resented her maintaining her own property, you would not let her buy anything for your property so that it might be a home to her. And as a result of that comment, you lost your temper and drove at excessive speeds, frightening Miss Burgess before bringing the car to a sharp stop. You then headbutted her and dragged your stubble down her face, causing grazing injuries to her face. She fled the car on foot to get away from you. All of this was the background to the circumstances of the brutal and life-changing assault which you subjected her to on the 17th of February 2025. She'd been staying at your house and had slept in your spare room. You were due to go to work. The relationship had become such that she'd resolved to end it. You took her a cup of tea, and she said that because of how the relationship was, she no longer wanted to be there. You, as was your habit, turned it back on her. You accused her of always making things difficult. At one point, you put your fist to her face, such that she feared an immediate assault, and she begged you not to hurt her. As a result of this bullying, she backed down and said that she would stay, but you were already in a rage. You went back downstairs and raged on, and because of your behaviour, she felt that she couldn't safely leave the house. You then came back up the stairs, you pulled her down the bed towards the foot of the bed where you stood and she was kneeling. You then placed your hands on her head and pushed down with all your strength. You were shouting over and over at her.
This is shocking. It really is shocking.
I quote from her evidence. He got both hands onto the top of the head and he started to push down. And I was trying to scream and suddenly I couldn't scream. And I've never felt a force like it. He pushed my head down and I couldn't say stop. I tried to say, "You're killing me." And he kept holding and he kept pushing. And normally by now he would have stopped an incident like this. He wouldn't have gone on. And he kept pushing. And I felt my head was being folded into my body, my head completely into my chest. And I felt it crack and I felt all feeling go out of my body. I thought, I'm dying. He's not stopping. And he was shouting, "I will shut you up. Shut up. I will," like a monster.
He's bad.
That image of her head being folded into a body was one to which she returned again and again in her evidence. And it's plain from the jury's verdict and the evidence in this case that you fully appreciated that given the unnatural position into which you were forcing her head by applying more pressure, you intended to cause really serious bodily harm. Indeed, I am sure that you must have intended to cause really serious neck injury, which of course is exactly what you did. What you had done was to cause, as it was put in the medical evidence, a severe anteriolisthesis of C6 and C7 with complete bilateral facet fracture dislocation. The medical evidence went on, saying that there had been gross subluxation with displacement of the mid-cervical spine at the C6-7 level. This was associated with fractures. There had been a total disruption of the anterior and posterior longitudinal ligaments. The agreed expert evidence at trial is that this injury required very substantial hyperflexion force to cause it, and we're told that this was the sort of injury one would expect if a person had fallen from height. Despite a lengthy operation, Miss Burgess has been left with a permanent paralysis from the chest downwards. While she has some use in her arms, she cannot move her hands. She cannot feed herself. She cannot dress or look after herself. She lives in a specialist care home with round-the-clock care. There is no prospect of improvement, and I will return to the devastating effects of the injury that you caused in a moment. In the aftermath of...
And all she wanted was to get out of the abusive relationship, and she couldn't. She tried, but she couldn't. He didn't let her.
The incident itself, you were concerned only with yourself. You initially told the 999 operator that she'd fallen from her bed. Once that call was over and you were waiting for the ambulance to arrive, she told you that this story would not stand up to scrutiny. And you bemoaned the fact that should you tell the truth, you would go to prison, lose contact with your sons and lose your business. Against that background, and at a point of ultimate vulnerability, she agreed with you to say that the injury had been caused during affectionate play fighting. However, once at hospital and able to contemplate her true situation and removed from your malevolent influence, she bravely resolved to tell the truth. In the following days, when you were asked by Miss Burgess's sister and brother-in-law to provide an account of what had happened, you repeated the lie. The conversation was recorded, and I heard it during the course of the trial. When you were challenged by them with the opinion of the medics that the injury was not consistent with your account, you forcibly demanded to know if they were calling you a liar. Of course, you were a liar, but even when caught out, you persisted in that lie. When they told you in that same conversation that she was breathing with the assistance of a ventilator, you even suggested that the medics had done some harm. They hadn't. All they had done was try to repair the grievous harm that you had caused. When you were interviewed later that week, you handed in a prepared statement in which you suggested that you cared for her, saying you could never intentionally harm her. Of course, in addition to causing these devastating injuries, you knew that you had already controlled her and assaulted her, causing her injury on previous occasions. In the interview itself, you answered a few questions, but still stuck to the ludicrous account that you had caused these injuries in a play fight. At trial, you did not give evidence. Miss Burgess, her daughter and son, and other friends and family have attended court today. And I've heard the victim personal statements, which she and her children have prepared and read out to me. They are amongst the most upsetting statements a court could ever hear. Miss Burgess's statement is carefully set out, dividing the effects of your attack into a number of headings. The first covers the physical effects. She sets out the immediate consequences of your attack upon her. After an 11-hour operation in which skilled surgeons tried to repair the damage you had caused, she was left for 10 weeks, unable to breathe without a ventilator. She couldn't eat. She couldn't speak. She said she felt helpless and terrified. Then she was moved to a spinal rehabilitation unit. She is permanently paralyzed in all 4 limbs. She has control over her arms, but none over her hands. She cannot attend to her most basic needs and functions. She suffers with bed sores. She can't cough or clear her throat without help. She's at risk of choking. Though paralyzed, she is not without sensation. On the contrary, she has constant pain in her hands, feet, and chest. She describes a sensation that her skin is like it's stuck to blocks of ice. There is a burning sensation across her back. Around her trunk, she feels as though she's wearing a suit of armor, which is 2 sizes too small. Her blood pressure will sometimes become dangerously low or dangerously high when her pain creates a hypertensive crisis. That is only one heading of harm in her statement. Next is emotional impact. She has depression, anxiety, and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Her statement must have been so hard for her to compose. Obviously, someone's wrote it for her, but it's her words. And this is shocking. I didn't realize how shocking this was. It comes with viewer discretion and everything. I will alter the heading because this has brought back so many memories for me, Right, carry on.
She suffers flashbacks of the attack on her. She grieves the life she has lost. She loved to sing for pleasure, but also professionally. She now cannot sing. She was someone who liked to look her best. She can no longer look after her own appearance. She has to leave that to others. A third heading is the impact upon her family. And this aspect of harm is also attested to by the victim personal statements from her children. Her whole family has been traumatized. Her mother cannot come to terms with what has happened, and frankly, which parent could? When you attacked her, she'd been living with her daughter's partner, and 3-year-old granddaughter, who cannot understand where her beloved grandmother has gone. Miss Burge's children, who should have been enjoying the support of a loving mother and grandmother, have been left grieving her injuries and travelling to see her in a residential care setting. The impact upon them is profound. She describes the social impact. She used to be an active person with a normal social life. Now she can't drive. Getting anywhere, including to court today, is a complex operation involving many people and careful planning. She feels cut off.
So she's actually appeared in court, which is good. And she needs 24-hour nursing. And so she's brave to have gone to court today. And I give her a medal for it. I really do.
From normal human contact. The financial impact is profound. When you did this to her, she had just started up a new business following her retirement from teaching. That exciting project is, of course, over. She's lost her financial independence.
Oops,
The financial stress is piled on top of the other unbearable stresses of this already extreme situation. And for her, of course, there is no insurance payout.
That's it.
And she believes she will have to sell her home. She then describes the loss of her quality of life, and I can put it no better than she did. And I quote, "I am left living a life I didn't choose and wouldn't wish on anyone. This isn't just a physical injury, it is the destruction of a life. No sentence I can pass upon you could begin to equal the harm that you have caused. I must pass the sentence which I consider to be just and lawful. But the fact remains that even with the lengthy sentence I am about to impose, you will have a prospect of a future which you have denied to your victim."
The sentence isn't long enough.
I'm required to consider whether there is a significant risk of you causing serious.
He should be given life without chance of parole, and never see the light of day again. And I really, really, really hope that when he goes to jail, the prisoners realise what he's done and they beat him up or do something or take his life, and that he deserves every bit of punishment this judge is going to give him. You know, my partner, I didn't go to court over with what happened to us because I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't strong enough to do it. So, but this woman, she was strong. So well done to her, and well done for her attending court, you know, yesterday it was, I think. If I'd known what this video entailed, I wouldn't have covered this story. I really wouldn't, because I know it brings back memories, and it's memories I don't want to bring back.
Harm by the commission of further specified offences. You're 57. You have one previous conviction for causing grievous bodily harm in 1990 when you were 21, for which you were fined by the Clitheroe Magistrates Court. You didn't give evidence at your trial on this matter. The account you gave to the police was that this horrific injury was caused during what you described as play fighting. That was plainly false. Indeed, during the trial, it was not put forward as a possible mechanism for the injury, and must have been false given your plea to the lesser offence. To the author of the pre-sentence report, you have chosen to give an equally fanciful and dishonest account, which is quite different to the one you gave to the police. It's perhaps a measure of your refusal to accept responsibility that you deny to the author of the pre-sentence report being guilty of controlling or coercive behaviour, even though you pleaded guilty to that very offence. The author of the pre-sentence report describes your account as evasive. I go further. It's just dishonest. Your inability to accept even that which you have already admitted makes you more dangerous. You are not capable of change until you accept that you need to change. I take into account your sense of entitlement. On your account to the author of the pre-sentence report, that day Miss Burgess said she wouldn't be at home that evening to make your evening meal, and that irritated you, you say. As the author of the pre-sentence report points out, you failed to see or to understand that she had a life of her own, separate from the life with you. I must also place this incident in the context of the other offences of violence, and also of the coercive or controlling behaviour within the relationship. The author of the pre-sentence report notes that using a particular tool to assess your risk of reconviction, the risk is assessed as being low. The author of the pre-sentence report does not agree with that assessment. Instead, they assess the risk of you causing serious harm as very high, especially to intimate partners, particularly whilst you don't accept responsibility for what you've done. You're said to be at medium risk of serious harm to members of your own family. I am satisfied that you are at significant risk of causing serious harm to other people by the commission of further offences. This is not a case where a life sentence is called for, However, I am satisfied that an extended determinate sentence is required in order to protect the public from you. Given the length of the sentence I'm about to impose, you would not be released until 2/3 through your sentence, even if a determinate sentence were imposed. However, public protection requires the additional protection of the review of your release by the parole board and an extended license. Once released, you may form another relationship. That will be a highly dangerous situation. Extended oversight is plainly necessary. Turning to the guidelines, count 1, that's to say assault occasioning actual bodily harm, is at A2 with a starting point of 18 months and a range of between 36 weeks and 2.5 years custody. Count 2, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, is at B2. You headbutted the victim in this case, thereby placing it in that category. That gives a starting point of 36 weeks and a range of between a high-level community order and 18 months custody. I agree with the Crown that the offence of controlling or coercive behaviour at count 5 is at category A1 with a starting point of 2.5 years and a range of between 1 and 4 years. I disagree with the written submissions of your counsel that this was not persistent conduct. It was. It falls into higher culpability as persistent conduct and conduct intended to humiliate. The offence of causing grievous bodily harm with intent at count 3 is culpability A for 2 reasons. Ms. Burgess was obviously particularly vulnerable due to the circumstance of having been controlled, bullied and assaulted over a period of time by you. She was trapped in your house, in bed, in her bedclothes. Furthermore, you applied extreme force to her neck. Your counsel says this does not amount to asphyxiation, suffocation or strangulation. I don't agree. You bent her neck so hard that it broke. She couldn't speak as you did it. If there is a difference, it is one without any substance. To draw a distinction would, in my judgment, be wholly artificial. The offence is at category 1 harm. I make this finding even though that category is reserved for harm which is particularly grave within really serious injuries. But I go further. Here the harm is high even within that highest bracket. The starting point for that bracket is 12 years imprisonment with a range of 10 to 16 years, not as your counsel concedes, in a bracket with a starting point, contends rather, a starting point of 5 years. The sentence for this count must be moved to the top of the bracket to take account of there being 2 factors placing it in culpability A and the severity of the injury even within its bracket. I will impose concurrent sentences for the other matters. This is to avoid double counting, especially because I take into account you having rendered Ms. Burgess particularly vulnerable by your commission of the other counts. However, there must also be a modest increase in the sentence for count 3 to mark the fact that it will carry the sentence for all offending. That uplift, of course, tempered for totality. I turn to aggravating features. Your previous conviction does not aggravate your sentence, but you are not strictly a man of good character. I note that these offences were, of course, committed in a domestic setting. I note what's said in mitigation. You've also known the heartbreak of a relative suffering serious injury. Your son suffered a serious paralysing injury in an accident. I've read the references put forward on your behalf and the letter which you yourself have handed in. I accept you have worked hard during your working life. Stand up, Robert Eason. The sentence after trial on count 1, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, would have been 20 months. With credit of 15%, that gives a sentence of 17 months imprisonment. The sentence on count 2, again, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, would have been 40 weeks. With credit of 15%, that gives a sentence of 30 weeks. The sentence on count 5, controlling or coercive behaviour, would have been 3 years. With 10% credit, that gives a sentence of 32 months. The sentence on count 3 for inflicting grievous bodily harm with intent is an extended determinate sentence of 20 years, total duration comprising 16 years custodial element and an extended sentence of 4 years. All sentences will run concurrently with each other. Sit down, please. The extended sentence is made up of 2 parts, a custodial period, which will be no longer than the 16-year period I mentioned, and an extended licence period of 4 years. making an extended sentence of 20 years duration in total. You'll serve 2/3 of the custodial period in prison before the parole board will consider whether it's safe to release you, and if so, on what
You won't
terms.
be released.
Once released, you'll serve on the custodial period which remains, and you'll then be subject to an extended license for a further period of 4 years, making 20 years in all. When you're subject to license, you commit another offence.
It's just a shame they can't do it so that when he's out, he's never to meet up with another girl. I know that would be hard to do, but he really doesn't deserve another girl, and I hope no other girl lashes onto him, because he's a horrid thing. He's a monster. He really is.
Fail to comply with the terms of your release, you are liable to be recalled to custody and may serve the entire 20-year sentence in custody. The days you've spent on remand will count automatically towards the custodial term of your sentence. Would you go with the dock officer now, please?
You're sent down, beast. Right.
Drawn up in the appropriate amount. And I make a restraining order as sought, which will remain in force until further order. It's unusual to make an order without limit of time, but I am satisfied that in the unusual circumstances of this case, it is both necessary and proportionate to ensure the safety and well-being of those protected by the order. You, Robert Eason, were convicted by the jury of the offence of causing grievous bodily harm with intent to Trudy Burgess, count 3 on the indictment at B4. You're also to be sentenced on counts 1 and 2 for assaults occasioning actual bodily harm on the same victim. You pleaded guilty to those counts on the day of trial. However, they'd only been added on the 20th of October at a relatively late stage. And in those circumstances, I will afford somewhat more than the conventional 10% credit which would apply for pleas entered at trial. You'll receive 15% credit for those pleas. However, count 5,
what about any compensation for her,
had been added in the June of 2025. You will receive only 10% credit for that plea entered on the day of trial. There can, of course, be no credit for the offence of causing grievous bodily harm with intent, of which you were convicted by the jury. All of these offences arise out of a relationship between you and Trudy Burgess. Sadly, her husband had died in the November of 2016, and you and she became known to each other subsequently through your working for her sister and her brother-in-law. A relationship followed, which was, for the first 18 months, a happy one. However, thereafter, a cycle developed whereby you would become verbally or physically abusive, then make up to her, and the relationship would carry on. When angry, which you frequently were, you would be verbally abusive. You had real difficulties in her being a teacher, and you derided her work on the basis that it was some.
Let me just check. I read that. Oh, it's playing from the beginning. I'm so sorry, everybody. I didn't realise that it's restarted. Obviously, I'd forgotten what was said at the beginning of the video, because there was just so much of it. You know, it's just unbelievable. And well done to Trudy for coming forward to have the strength to go to court and everything else. But it's a shame that her life's not her life anymore. You know, she can't do the things she wants to do. She won't be able to bear any more children. There's loads and loads of things able to do. But Trudy needs, you know, all the help she can. And I hope she gets it. And I hope he gets it in jail as well. I really do. If I knew anyone in the prison he was going to, I'd write to them and say, do him over. But I'm sorry my emotions were brought forward in this video. I didn't expect it to be the extent it was. And it just brought so many memories back to me from what I'd gone through. Yeah, so that's all I can say. But if you can like and share this video, you're liking it for the content of like the judge and the guy, not by me. And if you can share it too, because you know, by sharing the video out, if someone sees this and they're going through the same thing, they might just be able to have the strength to leave that relationship and seek help. You know, so I think we need to be an advocate to people that are abused by our partners. And I know it's vice versa. Women can abuse men, and that's just as, you know, men abusing women. And the same jail time and things like that should be the same for, you know, if you're a man abusing a woman and a woman, or a woman abusing a man. Yeah, so thanks for watching. I do really appreciate it. I've also got buymeacoffee.com, Kathy P. So if you fancy buying me a coffee, something stronger than water that I use, I'd really appreciate that as well. So I'd like to thank every one of you for watching this throughout. I will change the start of it, the type-in bit, to viewer discretion and that, because I should have watched this before I started recording it. And I was going to end the recording, but I thought, no, I'll just put on my big girl pants and just listen to it. I could have just taken my headphones off. That would have been so much easier, because then I wouldn't have had to listen to what Trudy had to go through. Yeah, so thank you again, everybody. Till the next time. I'm going to take a well-deserved break now. I've done 4 or 5 short videos this morning, and this is the longest one. I've got one scheduled to start tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. The reason why I've done it as a scheduled is because YouTube tell you if you schedule a few recordings, it gives you a better algorithm out there. So when I scheduled one this morning that I did yesterday, within like 3 minutes, I had three views on it. So it's just a trial and error, really. So the important ones I'm uploading straight away. But the ones that are not so important, I will schedule and see if what YouTube tell you to do is actually true. But the main thing I need at the moment is subscribers. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. And all you got to do is leave your DNA on that like button. You know, it would mean a lot to me. And, you know, right, that's enough. I need a cup of coffee now. So if you want to email me any cases that you want me to cover, my email's at the bottom there. It's truecrimefiles2026@gmail.com, and I will look into it. Or you can leave me comments in the comment section, because I read and reply to every comment. So thank you very much for staying with me for the last 45 minutes or so. I do appreciate it. Right, over and out now, and enjoy your day to whatever you're doing.